What it do, YouTube? It's your boy Bako99, man of the hour. And can you believe it's already week 6? I feel like the season just started 6 days ago. And actually, I've been thinking about that, how football is going to make me feel like my lifespan is shorter, because 5 months out the year flies by like 5 weeks every year. But hey, I love football, went and traded for the world, and now we're on to week 6. Before you know it, we'll be at week 10. So let's go ahead and take advantage of the plays we have this week in Daily Fantasy, and let's look at the week 6 rankings. Check them out.
Now, to kick it off like we always do, we're going to start with the week 6 quarterback rankings, because you need the good quarterback, because once your quarterback gets you some good points, you're pretty much set on a good start to the week. So quarterback's very important. That's why we always start off with them. And number 1 ranking, we have Drew Brees. And as you can see, we have Cam Newton as the number 3 in the rankings. That's because pretty much I think Drew Brees is going to take advantage of a struggling Panthers passing defense. And also I think Cam Newton is going to come back with them being 1-4, 1-5 actually, I think. And I think we might get the motivated Cam Newton, because you know there's 2 sides to Cam Newton. There's the motivated and there's a lackadaisical Cam Newton. And that lackadaisical Cam Newton is what got him in that concussion protocol. But both of those quarterbacks, Drew Brees and Cam Newton, I'm really high on that game, and both of those should put up some big fantasy points this weekend. And second in the rankings, we have Russell Wilson. And then 4th in the rankings, we have Big Ben Roethlisberger. And if you guys not aware, Big Ben has only had 1 game where he did not throw 3 touchdowns, so he's a good play as well. We got Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor is going to be more of a sneaky tournament play this week. I had Jameis Winston in my season league, and he's on a bye, and I was able to pick up Tyrod Taylor off the waivers just for this 1 week, because I just think that he's going to be able to run the football against the 49ers. So I'm not expecting some big passing game from Tyrod Taylor. I'm just hoping he gets me his normal, pass productions, but I hope I can get about 60 yards rushing and maybe a touchdown from that rushing. Next, we got Colin Kaepernick. Just the fact that the Eagles run so many plays, and you have Colin Kaepernick, which is a better athlete than Gabbert, I think this might be a good play this week against the Bills. We have Tom Brady next in the rankings. I mean, Brady, you can roll with him every weekend. And then we have Brian Hoyer. Until Brian Hoyer has a bad game, which I know is coming, but from what I know about Brian Hoyer, it will come when the game is really important, when he'll have his horrible game. But until then, he's still been a good play in daily fantasy every week since he's been in the lineup. However, I do think Jacksonville Jaguars sneakily defense is getting a lot better. And then we have Andrew Luck against the Texans. And to wrap it up, we have Alex Smith going against the Raiders. Moved along to the QB plays, and I like to do the QB plays because I put up the rankings, but then I like to pick out a couple of players from that to choose that I think will do the best out the bunch of each position. So, and also know that I usually take the clippings from the Fantasy Alarm website below, and that's what I'll read from to kind of give you their perspective as well. And so to get it started off, it's Cam Newton. And the reason Cam Newton's in the lineup is because we really feel that he is going to be motivated this week. Cam has one last hurdle to clear before he's able to play on Sunday, but by the time you read, this or see this video, that should be locked down as he's good to go and active for this week. The Panthers are desperate and will put their entire season into the hands of the reigning MVP, and we all know an inspired Cam Newton is a good Cam Newton. The Saints are 4th worst in defense and passing yards per game and the 5th worst passing per attempts this season. The number 2 top QB play of week 6 is Drew Brees. The Saints are coming off a bye and are going to be in a shootout at home this week. The Panthers secondary is absolutely destroyed by injuries. The game is going to be a shootout, and thus you need to decide which piece you want to hook up with for your anchor in this game as your quarterback play. Number 3 QB play is Russell Wilson. Now, Russell Wilson, I like him as a real player, and he actually produces in fantasy, so in no way, shape, or form am I saying he's a bad fantasy player. He's just not my style of fantasy quarterback, nor is the Seattle Seahawks, for the most part, my style of offense for fantasy purposes. But however, the last couple times he's had good matchups, and I did not go with Russell Wilson. He ended up having a real big game. So let's read what's going on with Russell Wilson. Wilson has had 2 weeks to recover full from his sprained knee that didn't slow him down anyway. This week he draws the Atlanta Falcons defense that has given up the most fantasy points to QBs this season and the 7th worst in passing yards per game surrender. So there you go. Russell Wilson is a good play for this week. Moving along to number 4 QB play for week 6, and that's Tyrod Taylor. And as I said in the previous slide, that we're really banking on Tyrod Taylor being able to pick up some yards and some fantasy points on the ground with his feet against the San Francisco 49ers. Taylor is usable on DraftKings this week, but really not so much on FanDuel or Fantasy Aces. Taylor is averaging 17.1 DraftKings points per game so far this season, and he's only had one big game. All Taylor needs to return value for us this week is 15.9 points, which makes him an excellent choice in both cash games or GPP options. Number 5 is Brian Hoyer. Hoyer is still on the lower end of the QB pricing chart this week, despite 3 strong 300-plus yard passing games. I actually like Blake Bortles in this game as well, so if you wanted to use him or Hoyer on aces, that would be perfectly fine. And last but definitely least is Colin Kaepernick. And the only real thing going for Colin Kaepernick is being in Chip Kelly's system and just being a better quarterback than Blaine Gabbert, because how many plays the 49ers under Chip Kelly runs per game. They lead the NFL in plays per game. So let me read what Fantasy Alarm says. I am intrigued as anyone on how Kaepernick is going to play this week. He is a perfect fit for Chip Kelly's system because he can run the football and make plays downfield in the passing game while using his legs. At this price, all we need out of Colin Kaepernick is 150 yards passing, 30 yards rushing, and 1 TD. Everything over that is gravy. With the rushing upside, he is well suited for a tournament play in daily fantasy this week. So moving right along, we're now going to talk about the Week 6 running back rankings. And number 1, we have Todd Gurley. And yes, people, Todd Gurley is coming and is going to start with the Detroit Lions. I have Todd Gurley in a seasonal-long league, and yes, I suffered some of the low production in the first 3 or 4 weeks, but I held on to him because I know that as this year gets going, he will put up some numbers and is going to start this week with the Detroit Lions. Same thing next with number 2, Lamar Miller. Lamar Miller has been getting the yardage and he has been getting the carries. The only thing he's lacked is a touchdown, but he's not going to go all season without scoring a touchdown, so I wouldn't be surprised if that train gets started Sunday night against the Colts for Lamar Miller. Next, Le'Veon Bell, play him every week, simple. Frank Gore just been steady. We have LaShawn McCoy. LaShawn McCoy's been tearing it up, plus there's no touchdown vultures to take touchdowns away from LaShawn McCoy, so he pretty much gets all the carries and the goal line carries. Next, we got DeMarco Murray. He's a strong play every week. And then we have Jamal Charles. Now, I've been hearing some reports from the players on the Chiefs and also the coach saying that the coach was like, yeah, we'll sprinkle Charles in a little bit throughout the game. He's not fully ready to roll 100% yet. I'm not sure how much to believe that or not believe it. But if you put him in there and he does have a big game, with his price as it stands right now in daily fantasy, look at DraftKings, it's $5,100. You may get some good value out of that, but I'm a little hesitant personally or whatever. But sometimes you don't want to miss the train trying to wait and see. You want to be the first to be on that play. And then after that, we got Ezekiel Elliott. The offensive line is a beast. The intriguing thing about this game, which I'm excited for this game, is that the Packers are one of the best run defenses in the league this year. So I'm really intrigued to see how Ezekiel Elliott's going to do against them. Plus, if he is able to be stopped by the Packers run defense, I wonder what Dak's going to do when he has to start throwing the ball a little bit more than he has. So that's a intriguing play. To me, it's a little risk, but still, Ezekiel Elliott and the Dallas Cowboys offensive line been balling out. So got to have him in the rankings. And then next we have Jonathan Stewart. He is healthy, ready to go this week. Now, what I worry about him is Cam Newton taking some touchdowns in the red zone. But if Stewart can do some damage from the 20-yard line to the 20-yard line, then he'll be a very good play this week. Same thing with Ryan Matthews. He comes in last on the rankings. They're going against the Redskins. I'm not sure how that fumble is going to affect. Sometimes you can't read these coaches and how they discipline players, because the Eagles lost that game because of that Matt Ryan's fumble, under the 2-minute mark of that game. So, but still, if he doesn't get punished really as far as the game and gets his carries, he's a really good play this week as well. Now moving along to the top running back plays of week 6, and we starting off with Ty Gurley. And I don't know about you, but Ty Gurley is going to be in my lineup this week. And the Detroit Lions have suffered so many injuries already, and they're the second worst defense in rushing yards in the league on top of that. So Sunday, it's only going to hurt that even worse, being the second worst rushing yards per team and then losing 2 more defensive tackles. The Rams run the ball as much as any team in the NFL, and this week that Ty Gurley smashes and makes fantasy owners real happy again. So definitely Ty Gurley is one of the strongest running back plays this week. Next we got Lamar Miller, and I'm telling y'all, the touchdowns for Lamar Miller is coming, and it's starting Sunday night. The Colts defense is terrible, and thus they are just what the doctor ordered for a Texans team in need of a chip shot. Miller ranks 4th in the NFL in carries, and the Colts surrender the 5th worst rushing yards per attempt. So there will be production in this game for sure for Lamar Miller. Moving right along to our number 3 running back play for week 6, and that's LeSean McCoy. There are essentially 5 premium running backs in play this week in daily fantasy, so it will be up to all of us to determine which to pay up for and which to fade for less expensive options. The 49ers give up the second most rushing yards per game and grade out as 3rd worst run defense in the NFL according to Pro Football Focus. And the number 4 running back play for week 6 is Jonathan Stewart. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that he's a top play, but he definitely has a good value in daily. And in seasonal long, if you're suffering from a bye or an injury and you have Stewart on your roster, don't be afraid to use the running backs in the highest scoring game of the week potentially. Stewart is finally healthy and will find plenty of room this week against the Saints. The Saints have given up the most fantasy points to running backs this season. Now moving on to some more running back plays, we have Le'Veon Bell. Now you know we can play Le'Veon Bell every week, but Ben Roethlisberger plays way better at home than on the road, and this one smells like a trap game for him really. Bell is, on the other hand, is living up to his workhorse status and has gained over 150 yards in each of his first 2 games this year. The Dolphins give up the most rushing yards per game so far this season, so if you do not play Big Ben in daily fantasy this week, then Bell would be the perfect option for your top running back. Second to last for the running back, we have Jamaal Charles. It's not easy to find mid-price running backs this week on daily fantasy. Charles is going to be very low owned this week because so many are waiting to see him be the lead back first before they play him. But we know that the Chiefs like to utilize one running back, and thus this could be the perfect setup for a Jamaal Charles breakout. The Raiders defense surrenders the 3rd worst rushing yards per attempt and the 6th most rushing yards per game this season. And last, who we have for the running back plays is Ryan Matthews. Now, Jeff Mann's at Fantasy Alarm was spot on about Ryan Matthews last week, and it helped me out. So I'm going to read to you what he's saying about him this week. I am getting sweeter on Matthews the closer we get to Sunday. He's always an injury concern, and the fumble last week has me even more concerned. But it appears as though Matthew's role is safe, and that means plenty of touches against the Redskins teams that ranks dead last in rushing yards per attempt and 3rd worst in rushing yards per game. So we went over the quarterback and running back rankings. So now on to the wide receiver rankings. And number 1 for this week is Antonio Brown. I know, right? What a surprise. So let's just keep it moving. Second, we have T.Y. Hilton. I was on board with kind of thinking that T.Y. Hilton will have a down week, but he absolutely kills the Texans every time they play. So you can't ignore the history. So T.Y. Hilton is number 2. Jarvis Landry is ranked number 3. Jarvis Landry let us all down last week in the rankings, but when the matchup's good, the matchup's good. The Steelers' pass defense is not great at all, so you have to run sometimes with the matchups and just let the game play out. So Jarvis Landry is at number 3. We have Kelvin Benjamin at number 4. We have Chris Hogan at number 5. Now understand, Chris Hogan is more of a tournament play, or if in seasonal, he's more of a big hit or miss play. So he can get you 20 points or more with some big plays from Brady, but he can also get you 5 points. So Chris Hogan is more of a tournament play, but still he's priced very low right now, and you could need him to fill in your roster towards the end. So Chris Hogan is ranked as number 5 this week. Then we have Willie Snead, DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green. We have Terrell Pryor going against the Titans, which should be utilized a lot in that game, so he may produce real well for his price tag. We have Allen Robinson, which I think is going to have a big game against the Bears. They're coming off the bye week when they went to London the previous game, so well rested. Should be a good game. We have Julian Edelman, Rashard Perriman. We have Steve Smith out, so you could roll with Kamar Aiken, but for a sneaky tournament play, Rashard Perriman. And then to wrap it up, we have Doug Baldwin and Will Fuller. So let's take a look at the wide receiver plays for week 6. And number 1, of course, is Antonio Brown. And as you can see, what Fantasy Alarm says about Antonio Brown, always, always, always. We don't have to tell you that Antonio Brown is a good play on a week-to-week basis. But we still have to put him in the rankings just to acknowledge that he's still going against a good matchup. So he still should produce top fantasy numbers this week as well. Number 2, keeping it consistent with the other slide with the rankings, is T.Y. Hilton. Hilton is the only receiver in the NFL to have double-digit targets in each of his first 5 games this season. Hilton will line up in the slot against Kareem Jackson often this week, which is a matchup Andrew Luck will likely take advantage of often. Number 3 play is Jarvis Landry. And yes, I'm going back to Landry this week despite his stinker he put up last week. The Dolphins are going to throw the ball 35 plus times, which means 10 plus targets for Landry is very reasonable. He makes a very reliable cash game option this week in daily fantasy. So if you can get him in your daily, he should do a solid for you this week. The number 4 wide receiver play for week 6 is Kelvin Benjamin. With Cam back, we can once again expect Benjamin to return 2 to 4 times his value of his salary this week in daily fantasy. The Saints secondary is so bad, we don't even know who will be on Benjamin most of the day. If it is Ken Crawley, that would be a total mismatch, as Crawley currently ranks 90th out of 106 cornerbacks in Pro Football Focus rating systems this year. So let's keep this moving on with Chris Hogan, because we got your 8 plays this week for the wide receivers, so you're going to have a lot of options. And the number 5th play is Chris Hogan. I'm very surprised to see Hogan's price so low after his big game last week against the Browns. The Bengals rank 6th worst in coverage according to Pro Football Focus. He is the home run threat for the Patriots, and thus he is in play for GPP tournaments options this week in daily fantasy. Number 6 is Will Fuller. Now, I'm more on Hopkins this week than Fuller, but I always trust Fantasy Alarm and what they have to say, so let's see what they say. I would not be upset if you use DeAndre Hopkins this week either. Oh, I didn't even know that was going to read that. But Fuller draws Patrick Robertson of the Colts in coverage, who cannot keep up with Fuller's speed at this point in his career. So there's definitely big play opportunities in the game this week, which I think may actually be another shootout as well. So Fuller is a great play this week. And number 7, we have Terrell Pryor. I like Pryor more this week than I have all season. He's a mid-level price and get one of the worst cornerbacks this week in Paris Cox, so that alone makes him a good play for week 6. And last but not least is my man AJ Green, the great AJ Green. And paying up to be contrarian here, but the game flow really calls for a lot of AJ Green. The Pats will be able to push the ball up and down against the Bengals, and that will keep the pressure on Andy Dalton and the Cincinnati Bengals passing attack. Green's road splits are also incredible, as he averages well over 110 yards per game there over his entire career. So let's keep this train moving to the tight ends for the rankings of week 6. And first we got Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham has finally looked like he's back to normal, and the Seattle Seahawks are definitely starting to get him involved in the passing game. And going against the Falcons, who give up a ton of fantasy points to all positions, makes him a great play for week 6. Next we have Delanie Walker. Mariota targeted him heavily last week, so I expect the same this week against the Browns. We have Rob Gronkowski as number 3. Number 4 ranking, we have Charles Clay. I'm not particularly always high on Charles Clay, but I just think that other than LeSean McCoy, there's only one really weapon, and it's Charles Clay, because the receivers on the most part do absolutely nothing as far as fantasy relevance. So Charles Clay for this week comes in pretty high on the rankings. Next we have Zach Miller. They're going against the Jags. We have Greg Olsen against the Saints. I really like that play with Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is a beast, and then so he's always a good play. And then we have Vernon Davis, and he's a little bit of a sneaky play, but Jordan Reed suffered a concussion, and I'm still waiting to see, because I'm not sure if this is his 5th concussion. And if it is, I think there's an NFL protocol where you have to miss about 3 weeks, so I'm not sure if he's up at that number, but for this week he is definitely out. And Vernon Davis could be a sneaky play in tournament lineups. And then next we have Martellus Bennett going against the Bengals, Coby Fleener against the Panthers, and that's another player in the shootout. So if you don't have any of those players and you get down and you need a pretty low price tight end, Coby Fleener may be a good option. And then last on the rankings, we have Dennis Pitta going against the Giants. So now let's take a look at our top plays we have for week 6 for the tight end position. And number 1 again is Jimmy Graham. I absolutely love Graham this week, especially on FanDuel. DraftKings priced him up a ton, but he is still usable there as well. The Falcons give up the 3rd most fantasy points to tight ends this season, so Jimmy Graham is a strong play for week 6. Number 2 top play, Rob Gronkowski. The best ownership predictor that I've seen says that Gronk will be between 6 to 7% owned this week in daily fantasy, which is great if that's the case. When you can get the best player at his position at that low ownership, it screams opportunity all day, every day. Number 3 on the list is the man who seems to always be on the top plays whenever he's healthy and active, and that's Delanie Walker. Marcus Mariota finally looked like a decent quarterback last week. He was laser focused on Walker, too, who went for 5 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown against Miami. Now they get the Browns this week, who have given up the most fantasy points to tight ends this season. And to wrap up the tight end plays for week 6 is Dennis Pitta. Simply put, Pitta ranks 3rd in targets, catches, and 5th in yards from a tight end this season, so he's a good play this week for week 6. And finally, to wrap up the week 6 rankings, we have the defense and special teams. And leading in the rankings for week 6 is the Buffalo Bills going against the 49ers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are being shown as number 2. That is not correct. Please don't run them out as a number 2 option ranked this week when you're choosing much better defenses, so we'll get to those. So start with number 3 are the Tennessee Titans going against the Cleveland Browns. 4 we have the Seattle Seahawks, which if you really look at the stats, the defensive stats this year for the NFL, the Seattle Seahawks are still ranked as one of the top defenses in the NFL this year, and so that alone, they're good plays. It's just that they're going against the Falcons, who are looking like elite on the offensive side of the ball, so we can't put them up as the number 1 and number 2 ranking, but still come in number 4, which is very strong. Then right under them, we have the Los Angeles Rams, which I've been liking playing the Rams in a lot of these weeks in daily fantasy, and they're going against the Lions, so that may be one of my favorite plays this week. And then we have the New England Patriots going against the Bengals. The Pittsburgh Steelers is where they should be ranked, going against the Dolphins, and the Steelers do have a bad pass defense, and the Dolphins can kill with Landry and Parker, maybe, but still overall the Miami Dolphins are just struggling and weak, and the Steelers are still a okay play this week. Next we have the Houston Texans. I still think the Houston Texans defense is still good even without JJ Watt, but they're going against the Colts, and this could be a potential shootout Sunday night, so they're a little bit lower this week on the rankings. And to wrap it up, we have the Baltimore Ravens going against the Giants and the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are really improving every week because we predicted them to have a real strong defense at the beginning of the year. It didn't start off like that, but they're starting to come around, and this week they're going against the Bears, so that may be a good sneaky play in daily fantasy as well. And leading off with the top plays for week 6 is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills draw a new and certifiably erratic QB on a team that has traveled across the entire country playing in London the previous week. So with that being in the equation, Buffalo Bills are a top play this week. The number 2 play are the Tennessee Titans. The Titans will be a heavy owned defense and special team this week in daily fantasy. They are at home, a 7-point favorite, and facing an offense this week who cannot throw the ball worth a damn. So definitely have the Titans on your radar for plays this week in daily fantasy. Moving along to the third best play of week 6, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. The Falcons poses some risk for the Seahawks defense, but that's nothing a little rainstorm can't fix, so pay attention to the weather because it's supposed to be a little bit nasty for parts of the game, which could affect the passing game. So Seattle Seahawks are a top play at the number 3 for week 6. And finally, to wrap up this week's video for the rankings and for the defense play, it is Baltimore Ravens. Such a cheap defense and special team option for a unit that is in top 10 in fantasy scoring despite not having a TD yet. So if they keep producing the way they are and actually get that TD, then you may be looking at a performance for a certain week on along with the Minnesota Vikings have been doing. So the Baltimore Ravens wrap up the best 4 plays this week for defense and fantasy football.
But there you guys have it. Those are the top and best plays for fantasy football and seasonal long DraftKings FanDuel, and then give you some good things to think about when you're doing with your seasonal long fantasy. And I really wanted to say before I leave, appreciate everybody who's been watching, appreciate everybody who's been engaged. The weeks that I'm sick of football for the moment or that night and I don't feel like doing any videos or doing any research, the fact that you guys been watching this video and been leaving me some feedback in the comments and things like that really makes it worth it. So I promise I'll continue to keep doing it, and you continue to watch this video, and then if you like it or subscribe to my channel, that would be greatly appreciated. Appreciate you watching this week. Peace.